Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Data Protection Made Easy podcast. Today, I'm joined by Kane and Katharina. Hi, everyone. How are you doing?
Okay.
Hello.
So today episode is about love, trust, and due diligence on managing your relationship with third parties. It was a very good episode. I really, really enjoyed it. What would you say about the topics and anything in particular that you would like to mention?
I really love the session. I always like doing the topical sessions, especially this week, as it was a Valentine's Day special for all of our lovebirds in the audience. But it was a fun little session. As I mentioned, it's always nice to talk about third parties because I think they're a very layered topic. In specific, we're sort of talking about the risks accosted with them and comparing the SMEs with probably the big multinational orgs. And I thought, cause for some really interesting conversation. We had a lot of conversation going on in the background in the chat as well about some of their own practices internally as well, which is always really nice to see. What about you, Katharina? How did you enjoy the session?
Yeah, I found it very interesting. I think your part about red flags was my favorite. But I feel it was very useful for the listeners as well. I think that third parties might be a tricky part of data protection. So I hope you'll find it useful.
Yeah, on this note, we'll leave it to it. Thank you very much.
Well, yeah, let's begin, shall we? Is there any news that we want to talk about before we get into the brunt of the session?
Yeah, I think it's just important just to make a point because last week we spoke about the implementation of the big changes from the doer now that they are already in place. And we had from yesterday, finally, the ICO has published a final complaints handling guidance. It's true that the requirements and the legislation will be only in place by the mid of June this year, but I think it's always very useful to have some guidance. I think is the complaints procedure is one of the biggest changes from doer. So I'm quite keen to see what the guidance from the ICO actually has to say. I did not have a chance to read. I'm not sure if any of you had.
No. Well, I've seen the news quite late into
Like not on the plan.
I'd like to go. But Charlotte, I retract my statement if that means you don't get any more animal facts. I do take that back. And I must apologise.
It's true. We forgot about it.
Yeah, no, I was waiting for it, but we did start earlier than usual, actually. I think going straight into it. But if you do have one to share, Charlotte, then
Let's play share. What is your favorite animal, Katharina?
Giraffe?
It's a giraffe.
Yeah.
Wow. Charlotte, do you have any fun facts about giraffes? 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 It's like I created like a plural word now. What is the plural? The giraffes with an S. Giraffes.
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 It's in multiple giraffe.
Giraffes.
Just on the point of the complaint stuff, Kate, you're absolutely bob on. Obviously, they did just the guidance on that. Again, not read it, but I'm glad that they've done it around this time. I think it's given people enough time to probably get in place what they need to.
Yeah.
Hoping it's pretty good. I mean, some of the stuff we've had recently in terms of guidance from the ICO hasn't been too bad actually, as of recent. There was some people raised about the ICO actually that I did see, and I couldn't believe it initially actually. But I know that we were talking last week about the change in structure for complaints and that they're going to be only really prioritizing high risk cases. I've seen something. I've seen John Baines on LinkedIn. I've been a little bit of a rant about the fact that their case response times now moved to 44 weeks.
Yeah.
That's absolutely incredible. I am like genuinely gobsmacked in how they still think that this is like a remotely okay thing to keep back on. I don't understand internally what's going on at the ICO. They have all of this large, superficial, senior structure. Clearly, no caseworkers to actively sit there and work on the complaints that they're receiving. What's the point in changing your structure if your response times are going to get even longer? It's a pointless thing to say anyway, because they've got to check the responses anyway. How do you even categorize the high risk to the low risk and the immediate to the not so immediate?
I mean, I completely understand that. I think when we are changing structure, there is always the risk that obviously those changes will require time for us to get used to it and like the structure internally, etc. But I think the main problem here is the lack of resources. There is no resources, human resources to actually deal with these complaints. Probably the budget is even lower than it used to be. That's right. That's why they probably are trying to get the right now to actually the controllers to deal with these new, like the complaints of any topic of data protection, because they are trying to get rid of the majority of work if possible, and then they are trying to consider those type of elements. But I think until we realize that it's important to invest and to actually have money and budget to deal with these things, nothing will change. We had this conversation, I guess, last week as well, because we came across it was about Ofcom.
Mm.
We came across the fact that there are so many people working in part-time in Ofcom, and it's the same with ICO. We had this conversation internally with one of our consultants that actually came from the ICO, and we were making the point that they majority of the consultants there and people working from these organizations, public authorities, they actually work in part-time, which means that it's the risk itself part-time. They don't have actually time to probably handle the stuff correctly, and then as soon as they actually already within these matters, they need to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess as considering I sort of oversee and manage a very similar function,
Mhm.
sort of like help desk, so to speak. It absolutely baffles me how that is. If I was telling all of our lovely customers that we would be waiting 44 weeks for a question about a SAR, then I think you'd very rightly be quite angry at me. And I think, and I appreciate there's probably more going on than I can be aware of, but I think it's troubling. And again, maybe we're being a bit too, or maybe I'm being a bit too harsh. I feel like maybe it's more me on this on this train than most. But I do think it is not a positive thing, and I think it will only continue to get worse. I don't think the right to complain is going to negate it in the way they think it will.
Mhm.
So I think they really need to think about the structure that they've got in place at the moment. And I'd love to see what their actual process is for the quality of that work as well, because obviously very differing qualities of work from the ICO and their caseworkers. So it's I would just love to be a fly on that wall. I really would.
Always making that point, are we? I just want to see.
Honestly, so okay.
No, yeah. Let's go then. Third parties.
Third parties.
It's a good topic, isn't it? We always love to talk about third parties. It's normally one of as well the most, I don't know, to be honest, for me and my clients is where, aside from the retention period, is where the challenges come. What is the third parties relationships? What about due diligence? What is enough? What are the risks? So that's why you are here, my love.
I love this topic.
Yeah, I know that you were working on on a case around procurement and third parties and due diligence,
Yeah.
and you were facing quite of challenges on that, don't you? Yeah.
Because this came up just after processor had a breach. So my clients, the personal information that they hold, just were
Like everything's just happened. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
And this is when we understood that we need to actually implement something in the procurement team and just start building that from scratch in order to have something in place to train the employees to be aware of what they have to do when they want to onboard a supplier.
Absolutely.
And we don't have to wait for a problem to come up, and actually to find a way to make this procedure as smoothly as
As possible.
No,
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
I think from what I've seen, especially with a lot of mid to large size organizations, is there's a lot of systems that just kind of seem to appear overnight, and it's a real difficult task as a DPO
Mhm.
to have a keen eye over that, because a lot of it is just they want to use a new system because they think it's going to help a process, and they do. There's no, and that's probably more so with organizations with less of a culture built around the forefront of data protection.
Mhm.
I think the key in that, and one of the keys in that, probably does come through in having that procurement process that is like, it's got to be really airtight. and very specific to the business. I mean, it's very easy to have these superficial general, we'll do due diligence, we'll put an agreement in place, we'll assign this to this person and that to this person, but it's got to be something that we can actively roll out to everybody, really, because
Absolutely.
Yeah.
in the main, it is going to affect. I mean, predominantly like line managers and stuff who are going to be using the
Yeah.
producing the system, so to speak, but it rolls all the way down to the bottom and right up to the top as well.
Yeah.
So
But again, I feel that you have to assess all the data protection risks before actually deciding who will be the supplier. So you can have the 1, 2, 3 options, assess the data protection risk, see if you can mitigate the risks based on the resources that you have, and then you can say, oh yeah, we can move forward with said supplier.
Yeah, I think you are raising very good points. I think probably the challenge that I've seen the most with clients, and even sometimes even with myself, is actually what is the balance? What is enough? What is the understanding in considering the controller, normally our client, understanding what is required to know one of the protection risks.
Yeah.
Obviously, we need to understand the nature and the volumes of data involved, etc. And will be a risk-based approach. But is it very important to understand that probably expectations from a smaller process will not be the same as a big organization? It's true that in terms of obligations, the UK GDPR is way more like broad, and you need to have a data processing agreement in place. You need to have your audit right, and you have this and then you have that. But I think it's broad enough for you to kind of have the risk-based approach and adapt the process specifically for each need and for each kind of size or risk, at least, of the supplier. But I came across one thing actually that I would like to put here. That is, we do have different type of due diligence for smaller, bigger, big based on risk.
Yeah.
But one of the questions that I sometimes have, like, what is actually enough? What I'm looking for here is the security side.
sure.
Yeah.
So on the security side, I feel, okay, I have these answers. Okay, I'm analyzing, I'm assessing the risks. I do appreciate these answers 100%. But again, what is enough for that specific supplier? What are actually the answers that I'm looking for on the security side? Because we understand the data protection, what is expected from us. But then the article in terms of security 32 just means like, okay, need to have like technical and organizational measures. You need to be satisfied and confident that everything will be fine, but that's it. So
No,
what is the line?
I think the point that's probably neglected when we're looking at technical and organizational measures is the organizational perspective of it. I think, superficially speaking, an organization can have as many security measures
As it can.
as you
Yeah.
want, really.
Yes.
And it's all going
It's the ideal world, isn't it?
it's all going to sound super impressive, isn't it? But it's all about how actively that relates to the organization and what in the background that helps facilitate all these like, interesting security measures that are listed. Because you could really throw me off by telling me how you improve stuff and all these different very technical things that I don't know as well as some of the tech wizards. But it's all about, if I think, I look at your role-based access control policy, I look at your information security management policy, and do I actually think, based on what I know about you and our relationship together, do I think that is enough to facilitate us working together and me being able to continue to comply as if it was basically still held by us? And you've got to feel typically that secure and that this wouldn't change if it was dealt by us or dealt with other by you. Hopefully, in some cases, elevated, but you definitely don't want it to feel lesser than, or that you're taking some kind of risk by having it on these systems.
Would your opinion change if you only share with them limited personal information, like only business emails, or if you share with them?
Definitely impacts it. And you see it, when you're looking at housing and you work with contractors. So some of these contractors are just plumbers. There's 3 guys in a van and they have a laptop.
Yeah.
And then they work off the phones.
Yeah.
And that can be really hard to manage and to think about sometimes, because it's like, yeah, I appreciate they're probably mainly only working off their personal phones. They're probably never really in an office, probably always on the move. And you're right, it's about understanding what level of data they're going to be working with and trying to move that to the risk. But to me, I'm looking at it, they're a plumber, they use their phones. Okay, well, we'll issue them with our work mandated phones that we have some kind of control over to some degree when they're doing work for us. Or, okay, if they're using their phones, I'm going to put MFA on the phones.
To be able to control it.
Yeah, and it's about grasping some kind of control over that and making the best out of these situations, especially with these contractors that especially with like tradies and stuff like that, where it can be a little bit harder to convince them to take data protection super seriously. Which some they do depending on it, but especially on the size of the organization. A one-man band who does your windows and your double glazing and stuff isn't going to have the tools necessarily to protect the data in the same regard a big massive multinational organization would.
No, absolutely. I think a couple of things as well come to my mind, and I'm sure that now I'll pick up now your brain game because I know that you prepared some thoughts about what are the red flags that we are looking for in supplier. I would just like to make the point about sometimes I feel like people rely a lot on the certifications on the security side because we have the ISO of this or we have the certificate of that, which is great because it means the Cyber Essentials Plus is definitely something else, an extra layer of protection. But that there is so many reliance on that, and it's not even understanding, or the question not even goes to what is the scope of the certificate, what is actually the scope that is under that certification itself. And another thing is, where does your kind of due diligence goes up to considering or not processes? Because I do remember a question that me and Kane spoke a couple of episodes ago about the marketing news. I'm not sure if you remember about all the sub-processes on accepting cookies, and once you accept cookies, you go to third part like hundreds and hundreds. So I'm just feeling, what is the line on actually considering the due diligence of even the sub-processors? Because it's true that the controller has obligation before the processor, and then the processor become the controller for the sub-processors. But there is as well an obligation on the controller side to the sub-processors. So what is actually the line to assess the risk and assess the due diligence on these sub-processors? Because I think it's an invisible risk. I think probably they are not considered enough.
I completely get you. I think it's something that's got to trickle down. And this is why I think your organizational measures are so important. Because if I'm trusting in a process, okay, if you're my process in this instance, I need enough evidence from you to prove that if you're going to engage another sub-processor, I can feel just as safe in you using them and the fact and your relationship with them as I do us together. And that is typically, I'm looking from their perspective at your procedures and handling with these sub-processors. And then say it passes down again to Katerina now, to other Katerina, I would then on your perspective, Kate, you need to have similar assurances that they then on back on the trickle down are able to do that. And it's not that the controller is going down and down and down and down and down. And they're checking every sub-process and they're checking your sub-processors and et cetera, et cetera. It's, you need to have enough faith in whoever it is that you're directly dealing with below that they have enough to then go and then re-engage someone on their end. Because if not, you'd never stop.
Would not be reasonable. But don't you think then, because there is this obligation for the controller side, that if anything goes wrong, how will you assess responsibility of the data controller? Because in the end of the day, you are trusting your data processor that they are actually acting and on the due diligence side, and they are actually having things in place to assess these two processors. But the activity itself, the controller is actually the control of this processing activity. So I'm just thinking about, on the responsibility side of things, if we do trust the processor to actually do that due diligence and we don't go further, but if anything goes wrong, it'll be actually up to the controller then to
well, there's always going to be
responsibility side of it.
There's going to be some kind of fallback, isn't there? I think that's always the problem, and it's hard. It is a difficult task, but it's how far
you want to go. Is it?
It's how far you're willing to go down that rabbit hole. Because you could really get stuck, couldn't you?
Do you think that it is possible to do it, like conduct due diligence to every sub-processor, or what kind of procedure can be
I don't think.
followed? Yeah,
I don't think so. I think currently, as things are going, it's not even possible in a reasonable and proportional way to actually do that due diligence. And sometimes actually, I am not even sure if the processor is actually aware of the sub-processors they're engaged with.
yeah.
So I think that's another thing. Is like, do they know exactly who they are processors with?
Yeah, on that note, I believe that like when we sign a data processing agreement according to Article 28, we usually agree that we have the right as controllers to carry out an audit to the processor. So this is something that we could do to ensure that they follow.
Do you think that's utilised? Do you actively see that?
This is my concern. I don't think this happens a lot. Like, since we have agreed that, and since we have carried out the due diligence, then we're fine. But shouldn't we go back to the processor once or twice? I don't know, in a year, in 2 years, and see if they have made any progress around data protection, if they know what's happening with their sub-processors, if they've changed the storage of their information and they transfer data internationally, and stuff like that.
I don't think for the time being, I'm not sure if anyone here actually has exercised his rights or knows some cases that has. But I think from previous experience and current clients, I've seen it exercised once or twice for big organizations, normally groups, that they want to actually know exactly what they are dealing with because a lot of sensitive data involved, etc. And they actually paid for the audit. So it's another thing is like, okay, yes, you do have the right to audit us, and we have the obligation on our side to provide you with all this documentation and etc. But we actually don't have a budget to demonstrate this. So can you pay for it? So like, okay. So normally is when the KPMGs and PwCs actually come into play to actually proceed with these audits. But
I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? And also, you're never going to be able to audit organizations like Microsoft, but I think Microsoft know that they're not going to respond to everybody, so they do enough to make like information publicly available, which I think is is fairly good going. But yeah, I would be very keen to see if anyone has actively gone out and sought out an in-person audit of detailed thing. But I think it depends on the risks involved in the processing. But I never heard of it of that activity, to be honest. But should we talk about some red flags?
Yeah.
Shall we?
What do you think about your red flags? What would be your absolute red flags?
I've tried to make some relationship style. I tried. It might not be that good, but I'm trying my best. I think one of the biggest red flags for me as a processor when we engage in a third party is if they are struggling to define the relationship. Like any sort of stage prior sort of a relationship with a party, whether this is your love life or data protection, being with a partner who's struggling to define the relationship. You don't want to be having that 1 hour kind of conversation with parties. If I'm speaking and engaging with a processor, I don't really get a good vibe if they're sending things like data sharing agreements my way. If they have weird statements around controllership, if they're asking questions on whether they are the controller or the processor or not, that doesn't really set a good tone with me. And I think first impressions are very important when it comes to relationships. Big thing for me as well, talking the talk, but an inability to walk the walk.
That was profound. All right. That was prepared.
Fresh off the nose. But no, for me, it's when we're looking at, I've noticed it recently in doing some due diligence work, is some very, very superficial statements. We comply with the UK GDPR. Okay, great.
We are UK GDPR compliant. We have like a stamp in our website.
You could also tell me that you drive a supercar. It doesn't mean I'm going to believe you unless you show me. And I think that's the key: is you've got to show me, not tell me. And I think also relatively relevant to relationships. Trying to make those links. So if you
can, the Valentine's.
They disappear when things go wrong. So a good partner should be one phone call away. And so should a good processor. If I have a personal data breach, my processor needs to be there ready to support me as quickly and as able as possible. Just like a good partner, you should be able to trust them with those big decisions, and also be able to rely on them in times when you need them as well. And it's all about swiftness and strong communication. And then probably lastly, probably the biggest one on me is the pretender. So, Mr. Flash, Mr. I Am, they've got a lot to say, but they can't do a lot in practice. And I think that's I think that's probably a big thing for me, as I think there's a lot of processors that I think know how to word things well enough to maybe be able to demonstrate that they look great on paper. And there's probably, we got all these policies and procedures. Oh, amazing. But it's really when you start to get into the technicalities of it is, that policy and procedure isn't really as good as I thought it was. It's not actually actively usable in an organization, and it's not working the way I thought it was. And, you told me that you were all this and that, and that's not what I feel like is being reciprocated right now. So I think those are my red flags. I tried to put a little bit of a fun twist on it. But have you guys got any for me that may have come to you whilst we were?
Well, I think after this, we are good to go now because, well, no, I completely agree with you. I think it's very important on the processor side for them to know their own obligations, and they normally tend to run away as soon as things go wrong. Or even, for example, they have the obligation to assist us with DPAAs, sometimes very superficial in a way, if they actually know how to complete them. Because I think there are so many questions that can be asked is, if they do know what they're doing, do they have any type of awareness of actually what they're doing? I know that on this, actually, I was now to pick your brains, because we were actually working on a project and they absolutely did not know what they're doing, actually called the things completely but they're by the wrong names. They were a massive organization one day, and we came to across the point that they had nothing in place on the procurement side.
Or they were calling DPIA a form and a procedure that was not a DPIA. So I actually believe that you have to understand what's their approach regarding data protection and how they actually handle all the procedures and all the documents that they have in place. Like if you have a DPAA procedure in place and the employees have no knowledge around that, they don't know how to conduct a DPAA.
Yeah, no, I
You comply with your data.
I understand that. And I know as well, and I think for the due diligence side of it as well, from the policies and procedure side, even if they do the assessment of, yes, we do have this in place, this in place, this in place, you are depending on sending a questionnaire. So you are completely relying on their answers. So it's a matter of know how to respond to this questionnaire. And what you do actually after this is actually, I think, what matters, because I think now is when the audit rights should come in, because you need to know in practice if this is working, because if not, you will only know if anything goes wrong. If they do know, if they have like procedure in place, escalation points, the policies actually work, and it's a security side of it, you will never know in practice actually aside anything happens.
But then my other concern is, can you dive into these procedures in an organization and see if what they have built actually works?
Yeah.
I don't know if you can do that.
Yeah, well, that
And this
applies to the audit.
these are my thoughts all the time about that.
And I think another point is important. And now, just speaking now, David's point is about the big companies.
Yeah.
We normally are talking about,
Same.
and obviously we do have Microsoft, Google's of life, and we do have as they our email providers. So we are doing our due diligence on them, and we do our report of findings. And even if we came to a point like, well, hold on, there are these clauses that should be here and they're Article 28, but they did not come, what you do. You definitely not negotiate with them, because they will never change anything for you if you actually have any type of response. Of course, it's up to you to decide to go
they
with them,
must
yes or
follow
no.
path. Yeah.
But in the end of the day, do you actually have a choice? Because I don't think you do actually, because you do have they say to you, well, is up to you after the risks.
Yeah.
You decide if you want to go.
Yeah, and
But then you have Microsoft.
the risk.
What your options?
What are your
Yeah.
options?
That sort of take up so much of the space in terms of certain solutions is something, especially with things like Microsoft, is sort of got you scratching your head a little bit. And you're right. I mean, I think with the bigger companies, it comes down to whether you're willing to take the risk that comes with it. Microsoft are very well known, but it doesn't mean that that they're free from their issues, so to speak. Obviously, we had there's that cloud strike incident,
Yes. Yeah.
not that long ago, when everything just kind of went kaput. And just because it's a big name brand and they're very reputable, doesn't necessarily mean that they're super on the ball with data protection. I mean, you see it in the news even more frequently at the moment of really, really large organizations who are suffering data breaches, some cyber incidents, which can sometimes be a little bit out of their control. But it's all about taking the if you're willing to take your time into finding something that suits data protection and the business, and that's really hard to find something that works really well like you want it to, and it can also help you in relation to data protection, is probably more difficult than I think I probably initially thought. I think you think, oh, if they're really good, they've probably got data protection in a good state as well.
Agree.
You could work with an amazing CRM system, could be fantastic.
In paper.
But from a data protection perspective, it might be a nightmare.
Yeah.
And it's determining on what is the benefit that this is going to give to the business. If this is going to, I don't know, double our profits, which is very, but I'd like to know a system that could do that. So if you know one, feel free to point me in this direction. But if that's worth the potential of a data breach, of a data leak, with this and that, then sure. But you've got to make sure that you've got enough internally to prove that you've at least done the diligence in making that decision, or it's really going to look to you as a controller as this is something that you needed to be aware of. You were aware of this, but something has happened. But it's better to be aware than to be ignorant, I suppose.
I think in terms of like third parties, I think it's so important to have a good procurement process. I think everything comes exactly from at stage 0. That is, okay, we do want to do this. So mark my words, is before something happens, not after. But before something happens, we should be able to have like 2 or 3 options and understanding exactly, okay, let's move on with due diligence on these guys, and understanding and then compare them. And actually, after this, we do have the agreements. We understand in terms of international transfers, I think is very important as well to bear this in mind, because can be a risk as well, and it's important to consider. And then actually after this, making sure that you are happy with the risks and you make a decision, always bearing in mind, unfortunately, that you are relying on the capacity to be all good liars or to know exactly what to put in the due diligence questionnaire. But if anything goes wrong, you as a controller are the one going before the ICO and proving yourself to actually you were the one making this decision, and then you need to evidence why, that like document your rationale. But I think as well, one thing that sometimes people forget and organizations forget is related to ongoing monitoring. Things can change. Things can change. We do all know this, even if it's not on the security on the organization side, can be actually on the reality, which means that the organization should adapt to this new reality. And if they don't, that is a risk, and vice versa. And some things can be that today are good, but tomorrow may not be good. And I feel that sometimes clients just forget, okay, we have done our due diligence. We have signed our data processing agreements. Everything is check, check, check. That's it. And I think that sometimes they forget that the ongoing monitoring, that today is not a risk, or at least is reduced, tomorrow could be a massive risk. And again, probably is not the wisest decision to actually to have them on board.
I think this was the aim of including the audit right into the UK GDPR. But on the other hand, I was thinking that we all have to agree that a risk will exist, a certain level of risk. Can we disappear the risk entirely. I don't think so.
No, I don't.
So,
I don't.
yeah, just to prove that we took into account all the risks identified. We implemented measures and controls to mitigate those risks, and we continue working on the compliance side along with the processor. Yeah, this is what I'm thinking. I don't know if there's perfection. And
I don't think there is, and I hope not, because if not, we don't have a job. So we need to
That's
make
right.
sure that it's still compliant at least 100%.
I mean, in essence, using any kind of third party is a risk.
Yeah.
Just processing data is
Yeah.
a risk. Like everything we
Yeah.
do inherently does tie to risk some kind of way.
Mhm.
It's about being able to mitigate that risk sufficiently enough in everything we do, where we feel pretty comfortable that even if something does go wrong, we're ready to react to it. I mean, that's the key. And I think, Kate, you probably raise a very, very key point in ongoing compliance of suppliers.
Thank you very much.
Because things change as well. And I think it's good to know that, and it's good to remain on top of, not even updates change for the supplier, but legislation changes, expectations change.
Exactly.
And it's about understanding if those suppliers now can continue to offer the same kind of compliance assurances that they did
Mhm.
when, we was just dealing with the UK GDPR and the Data Protection Act. But what about the doer? If they are, if I'm a housing association, what about stairs?
Yeah.
Can you help me facilitate with that? Or even as AI becomes more of a prevalent thing, we're now utilizing an AI software. Oh, okay, well, that's really good for us to know, because one, that probably, definitely impacts the risk, and it changes in terms of compliance what we have to do internally to keep a clean house. And it's a difficult task, don't get me wrong, especially when you're using multiple processors, but it all depends about scale. As a business, I'd rather have a lot of trust in, 2, 3 third
Absolutely.
parties if I can than 30 that all do like similar things.
Yeah, I'm just concerned sometimes, unfortunately, and I think that's exactly the point that sometimes people try to make is, okay, but they said they're already embedded in our culture. They are
No, for sure.
part of our
Yeah.
business, and we are assessing the risks. We are actually scared. What if they are not compliant anymore, and we need to change everything? That is very hard. That's the risk. I mean, it's part then about the strategy and about balancing actually the risks of the business on one side and data protection, etc. on the other.
It's everything.
Stuff. All the stuff that comes through with the change as well.
Mhm.
It is we've got to look at migration. We've then got to look at the stuff is stuck in LA. Some stuff like the lie, don't they? And I appreciate that. I mean, we've been using Salesforce since forever, and if we one day had to move off of that, I'd feel the same kind of way about it as well, because I spent so long getting used to Salesforce, and I know how everything
Can you
works.
imagine?
Yeah.
Now they're saying like Salesforce,
Exactly.
actually, but actually on Salesforce side, and defending now the Salesforce biggest ones in CRM. Phil sent us actually an email on a very good.
Yes, he
remember,
did. Yeah, he
a
did.
very good stretch. So I'm not sure about anyone here. Please let us know if you actually is something that actually happens more often than I was expecting. But we were informed as Salesforce users about new soup processors. So we did receive an email. Yeah, they're boarding
That's
on
good.
a new soup processor on their side, and they let us as a user to know exactly what they are, what they're doing, and give like a good summary in terms of paragraph-wise summary about what they're doing, expectations, data, where is hosted. And I think that's on the soup processor's point. I think that's the right thing to do.
I was quite impressed, actually.
Yeah.
It also obviously gives you the option to be a bit flexible with the use of it,
Mhm.
which is so key. And I think that is one of those superficial statements that existed. Oh, if you don't like any of our sub-processors, you're at liberty to consent to them, generally or specifically.
Mhm.
But if I ask you to change one, you're not going to do it, are you? Or if I say I don't want to use that system for my data, if that's crucial for operations, you're not going to be like, oh, as the controller, we'll listen to you. Don't
Yeah.
worry. They're all tough.
Because in the end of the day, actually, they need to, or they may require to have a written authorization from the controller to have a new soup processor working for them.
Yeah.
But majority of the relationships now, they already Microsoft does not work without those two processors. So actually, the controller, us, we need to accept because in on one hand they are the monopoly, like they have the monopoly of like email provider and SharePoint and OneDrive and etc. And the other side, then the other hand, if we don't have them, we are kind of excluded from that world. So we kind of just need to accept it. And I don't think that's actually very fair. I don't think I don't think that's really fair at all. And I think actually ICO and any other supervisor authorities should have that in mind when doing any kind of compliance checks or I don't know, any assessments or I don't know, anything like that. That should be considered, I think.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
really, really, really fair point. Do we have any closing remarks, so to speak, in relation to third parties that we think is an important thing to make known?
You made a point about your green flags. Shall I pick your rates now? Put it on the spot.
I mean, it's probably a lot of the adverse of of kind of what I'm stating is the red flags. I think, in essence, what I think makes a good third party to engage with is someone that is not willing to just provide the stuff that they've made prior, the pre-done DPIA, the pre-done screening questions. They're ready to go that step beyond to give you the answers that is tailored to you. It's not superficial. They give all of the evidence that they need to do to prove it. Accreditations are great. They say a lot, right? SOC 2, cyber, ISO, they tell you something, and it gives you a reasonable expectation that certain things have to be in place because you wouldn't have had the accreditation if not. But someone that is willing to break that down and explain to me how they got that accreditation and show me the weight behind those accreditations is really valuable. And also punctuality, be quick, be effective. If a breach does happen and you can be there to support in a time that is very stressful for a lot of DPOs, then you're of great value, and to keep people updated in the ways that we've explained with Salesforce, and I've seen some other organizations do it to differing success levels. It is key, and as a processor, being mindful that you are a processor is probably a really big part of that. Is remembering your role in the broader aspect of things, that you've got people who are kind of really relying on you in terms of
depending on you to actually achieve something.
And instead of ignoring that, treating it as your responsibility and really taking ownership of that. But I think those are probably my summarizing.
Absolutely. Anything from you?
No, I was thinking from a marketing perspective regarding to the data process that would be great to have everything in place, because if I am a data controller and I can see that they have so many procedures in place in such a condition, I would engage with them.
Yeah.
So from a marketing perspective, that would work.
Definitely.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think to finalize, I do prefer to support minorities. So I'll speak about like for the smaller suppliers. I think, unfortunately, those are the ones facing the biggest challenge and the biggest, where the controllers need to actually interfere most. And as well as on the controller side, sometimes it's very hard to get something from them, due diligence, even to them to understand. And I would say that the green flag for that would be initiative, would be, you know what, we don't know. I don't know how to answer these questions because I'm more focusing now on the housing perspective, where we have suppliers that are contractors as well, and they manage the pumps and all of that heats and all of that minor but very important things on housing management. And I think it's very important for them to have initiative. And actually, I don't know, but I want to know because I want to give you as much as I can in terms of support, because it actually is my obligation. But they have initiative and the culture to ask and be humble, to ask for help, and the controller side to actually, you know what, is on our best interest actually for you to do the things properly. So we will give you a little bit of support on awareness and as well, and we will help you as much as we can. I think that's a green flag on the supplier side. Is initiative. I think about everything. Both suppliers will be the big one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
On this positive note.
yeah. Some really good sort of thoughts to tail that off. Obviously, we've reached the end of the session today. So we really thank you all for joining us. Big thank you to Katerina as well, who's
Thank
also joined
you
us.
for
It's always lovely to have you joining the sessions as
course.
well. We hope anyone doing anything for Valentine's Day is having a lovely Valentine's or a Galentine's or whatever. And we will see you all next week for a GDPR radio session.
Yeah, thank you very much. Have a good Friday. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.